Voy a empezar a dejar entrar a los asesores, ¿eh?
Listo.
Hi, Barbara Samuels. Welcome. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. And
Welcome. We are
Hello.
already here with our Secretary General, Emilia Saiz, in the backstage.
Hello, Amelia. Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Barbara. Welcome.
So do we have a sense of who's joining? How large of a meeting?
The meeting shouldn't be very big because it is not a very open meeting. We have only invited the advisors to part of our leadership, the presidency, and some of our policy counselors. It is meant to be a closed meeting among ourselves to start preparing. So an inspirational one to kick off the year.
Wonderful. Great organization. Love it. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. We will start the meeting in about 7-10 minutes, and we will let you know when we start.
Okay, thank you.
Jorge Pérez Jaramillo, bienvenido.
Hola, buenos días a todos. Hello, how are you? So pleased to be here. Thank you for the very, very kind invitation and the great organization.
Thank you. We are still in the backstage. We will start the meeting in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I have heard it. Thank you.
Jorge, hay interpretación en 4 idiomas, así que puedes hablar si quieres en español o en inglés, como tú gustes.
Ok. Pues puede ser más fluido en español, o sea, no hay problema. Pero el texto de la presentación breve está en inglés.
Perfecto. Ya estamos con Emilia también aquí.
Gracias.
Samuels.
Ok. Hola, Emilia, un abrazo.
Qué bueno verte. ¿Cómo estáis por ahí en Antioquia?
Pues bien, trabajando ahora en la región. Son 125 municipios y estamos haciendo un ejercicio hermosísimo de coordinación con los alcaldes. Estaba pensando en cómo desarrollar una estrategia para promover que nuestros municipios se vinculen a la red. Luego hablaremos de eso porque
Sí,
hay municipios muy poderosos y muy interesantes.
Ya te voy a responder para eso. En realidad el departamento podría ser miembro también y así ayudáis al resto de los municipios. Ya conversamos sobre eso. Estamos preparándote una respuesta.
Muy bien, gracias.
Hi, Deborah Roberts. Welcome. Can we test your camera, please?
I won't be able to use my camera because I'm working in my office and we don't have the bandwidth.
No problem, but we can hear you.
Great, excellent.
Great, welcome, and we're in the backstage with Emilia already in the call, other Ubuntu advisors, and we will start in about 5 minutes.
Thanks very much.
Welcome, Edgar Petersev. Can you hear us? And can we try your camera and audio, please?
I can hear you. All good. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Welcome. We're already here with Emilia Saiz and other Ubuntu advisors. Welcome. We will start like in 5 minutes, the call. Well, the meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Just to remind all the Ubuntu advisors that we have interpretation. So please select the language that you will to hear, and we strongly encourage you to put off the interpretation when speaking so that we avoid a glitch in the system that sometimes happens. Bienvenida, María Fernanda Espinosa. ¿No se escucha? Hola, Ana Falú. Y hola, María Fernanda Espinosa. ¿Podemos probar sus cámaras y micrófonos?
Gusto, con todo gusto. Buen día a todo el mundo.
Hola, Ana, bienvenida.
Gusto. Hola, Máximo.
Hola Ana, bienvenida.
Gracias.
Bienvenida, María Fernanda Espinosa, también a la llamada. Estamos ya con Emilia Saiz, la secretaria general, y casi todas y todos los asesores Ubuntu. Vamos a empezar la reunión en 2 minutos. We will start the meeting, dear Ubuntu advisors, in 2 minutes. We will first see a video of introduction, then we will go to some technical notes, and then my colleagues Massimo and Jose will yield the floor to our Secretary General, Emilia Saiz, to start the meeting. Welcome, Aromar Revi. Can we test your microphone and your camera, please?
Here we are. Sorry.
Hi, Aromar, welcome.
Hi. Sorry, Pablo. Came in 2
No
seconds.
problem, welcome. Emilia, I think we are ready with our Ubuntu advisors. So as I was saying, we will see a 1-minute video of introduction. We will ask all the advisors to turn on your cameras. You have interpretation into English, French, and Spanish, and we suggest that when speaking, please turn off the interpretation so that we avoid a glitch in the system. My colleagues and our Secretary General will guide you through the whole session, but feel free to text us if you need anything from our side. CGLU, prevenidos. Ale, empezamos con video. Estamos listos y safe travels.
We are one world citizens, so that means if someone ain't living right, we all ain't living right. I am because we are Ubuntu, 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 Ubuntu. I won't go far without you, Ubuntu, 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 Ubuntu. It's not about me, but the crew, Ubuntu, 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 Ubuntu. Stick together like glue, Ubuntu, 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 Ubuntu. Global goals, what it do? G-L-O-B-A-L, gold. G-L-O-B-A-L, gold. G-L-O-B-A-L, gold. For each and every soul. Without you, life don't make sense. We working so misery ends. Can't be happy till we all free. Humanity, one family. So much money. Why do we have...
Welcome. Happy New Year to all. On behalf of the World Organization of United Cities and Local Governments, we would like to welcome our UCLG Ubuntu advisors, as well as everyone, to our brainstorming session, Municipalism Working Towards a Pact for the Future. Before yielding the floor to Secretary General Emilia Saiz, my colleague Massimo will introduce a few technical notes. Thank you.
Hello, advisors. Hello, everyone, and welcome again. Just a few very quick technical notes. Interpretation is being offered in English, Spanish, French, and Chinese. You can find it at the bottom right of your screen. Just please remember to mute your microphone when not speaking, and when speaking, please turn on your video and speak clearly and towards the microphone. I'll now yield the floor to our Secretary General Emilia Saiz. Thank you.
Thank you very much, policy team of the World Secretariat, and thank you particularly to our Ubuntu advisors As the song says, we are because you are as well. And that is the whole legacy of our South African presidency. Our past president, Park Stau, inspired us to create these advisory boards, and advisory boards that needs to work as policy sentinels. And I would like to also acknowledge the wonderful singer, Germaine Bridgewater, who is a Dutch singer from Utrecht. I see Hans Sackers has joined us from the city of Utrecht, that introduced us to the work of this rapper that is working with the schools around the world. We will see his video also later on, and we hope that you can use it in your work. That's the spirit. The spirit is we only exist in the mirrors of everybody that is in touch with us. We need to listen to everybody, and the spirit of cities are listening should guide our discussions. This is a closed session, as close as we can get it and as small as we can get it in a large network like UCLG. You will see a small group of participants. We've only invited the teams of our policy counselors and teams of our political leadership to join us in this brainstorming, where we need to set the tone on what we should be looking at in the coming year. I would like to this discussion to be as fluid as possible, as informal as possible. Of course, we had to give it a structure because we want to make sure that all of the Ubuntu advisors that are able to join us today will share the thoughts. But feel free to jump in between sessions. What we want to make sure is that you put your thoughts together to guide us in the throughout the year, to inspire us with the thoughts that you have, and that this proposal that we are making as municipal movement, a new pact for the future. What does this new pact inspire in you? How are you looking at that within your own networks, within your own contacts? That's the summary of the objective of this session. I will be introducing some of you. I will also be requiring my colleague Jean-Pierre and Bassi to join me in the facilitation of part of this session. But before getting into the discussions, I would like to do two things. First, to look at a video that we feel summarizes at what moment we are in the municipal international movement. It is no secret that last year, 2020, has really marked us. It has marked humanity. It will probably mark our future and the way that we look at things. And we have gone through very intensive processes, some of which you have been part of, guiding us through ideas. We have developed many documents, a lot of policy recommendations, and we have tried to do our best to gather some of the critical aspects in the video that I propose you to look at. It's very brief, but I think it will explain things better than I do. Have a close look. I don't have sound, colleagues. I don't know if this is the case for everybody. Let us try again.
In the largest gathering of the municipal world in Durban eThekwini in 2019, mayors and governors from United Cities and local governments understood that they had a historical opportunity to deliver a new model anchored in the territories. The municipal movement presented itself to the next decade stronger than ever, embracing its origins, safeguarding local democracy and loyal to the values and principles of decentralization, gender equality, self-government, and accountability. 2020 started by delivering the transformative vision for our people and the planet. Then the world stopped. The way we all relate to each other radically changed, perhaps forever. Our cities and territories would never be the same. The COVID-19 pandemic is a magnifying glass that highlights who and what we are leaving behind. What do we mean by the commons? What should our commons mean? Who cares for us? Who do we need to care for? No single actor can bring change alone. In this tragedy, we have found the reasons to keep working as guardians of the dreams of our communities, as global actors with transformational and convening power. We might not know what is coming, but we know what we need to do. Municipalism is the proof that there is another way of going about politics. This challenge can become a foundational moment for our world that bridges local actions and global trends. A world that guarantees equal access to public basic services. A world that has developed an ecological transformation. A world driven by the next generation of human rights. A feminist world that cares and thrives with girls, women, boys, and men that are equally empowered. A world based on solidarity. United Cities and local governments, an equality-driven movement, is committed to facilitating the space for local and regional leaders to make this world a reality. We need to do it for the future, with the governments, with the people, with the planet.
So, colleagues, this is the mandate that we have received from our political leadership. Some of you were with us at the World Council where we launched this video and this discussion. That World Council gave us the mandate to work towards this pact for the future, to develop some of the thinking that you have been listening to in this video. I will highlight some of the key questions that our political leadership is dealing with, that they have clarity about. They are committed to make a reality. But of course, this is not something that a single sphere or government or a single stakeholder can do on their own. So we need all the community to help us through it. We need all the thinking possible to be bold and develop these ideas. Some of them are quite difficult questions, like what is the role that government needs to play in safeguarding the commons, and how do we improve the models that we know of government to make sure that this is a reality? What do we consider essential? What are the essential services that should be protected? And how do we make sure that those essential services happen? What is then the role of local governments, and how should the interlocution be with other spheres of government? What does solidarity entail in this intertwined era where everything is connected? Is it possible to just focus on the local reality without looking at the global context? We sometimes say in UCLG, is it possible to be a mayor if you only focus on the local and you are not looking at the rest of the world? How important is that? What does generation equality entail? What does it mean? And what does it take to be truly a feminist municipal movement? I think we have come a long way. Just a couple of years ago, I even think about our Congress of 2019 in Durban, where many of these values were already worked on and discussed. Just a few months ago, some of these concepts were difficult to defend. We have made great progress now in acknowledging that public is back, that we need to develop the care society, that feminism is something beyond women alone, and that it needs to be part of and parcel of the modern societies that we all aspire to live in. But we still sometimes miss a little bit of the depth of what they mean and the choices that we would need to make to actually make all of this a reality. Now, this is what we are hoping you Ubuntu advisors to not give all the answers to, but start touching upon what are those very key triggering decisions or aspects that we need to look at to make this a reality. And we have also invited some political leaderships that are going to be with us today to provide their view of how they are looking at their own future. How does a city like Barcelona, we have here Vice Mayor Laia Bonet, look at the priorities for the future? What does it mean for a city like Barcelona that is heavily impacted by this new reality of the pandemic to look at the future with hope, because there is no option but to have hope and to be creative? How does a city like Xi'an look at this in a different context in China? How does a city like Mexico look at that? So I will be introducing them throughout as well. I wish us all very good discussions, and I would like to break the ice a little bit by introducing to you the advisors that we have with us. Don't be scared. You don't need to know everything as advisors. You don't need to have all the answers for the municipal movement today. We will give you some time throughout the year to sort this out. I will introduce you. These are your pictures, and we've been using this also in social media. But I will go one by one and invite you to give me one or two sentences about what you think you can do for us as Ubuntu advisor. What should our movement focus on? And literally just one or two sentences, because you will get the opportunity to have a longer pitch in the session. So let me let me start with Ubuntu advisors. And I would introduce Ana Falú, Chair, Professor, and Researcher in Architecture at the National University of Córdoba. Ana, dos frases. Unmute yourself. Unmute. No te oímos.
Sorry, here I am. Okay, again. Thank you very much for this invitation from this first Ubuntu Advisory Board meeting, Emilia, and good morning and greetings from this house to everybody. Well, I am Ana Falú, as Emilia said, and I am the advisor on gender. And I have to say two things for this starting. The consensus is absolute. The pandemic placed people at the center of the politics. However, this is a neutral category that is insufficient and leads to omissions in the municipal politics. From UCLG, we need to think, we need to address the political actions in terms of diversity and differences of the population and of the society. As Nancy Fraser said, it implies recognition of the diversity and redistribution. Those are two vectors, central vectors we should debate and we should go in deep, because the pandemic is not the same for everybody. We need to recognize, to place inequality, and finishing, and to collect the profound message of Ada Colau when she proposed to feminize politics. Thank you.
Mensaje recibido, Ana. 2 sentences, I said. Aromar, your turn. Aromar Revi is a founder, director of the Indian Institute for Human Settlements. You have so many other titles and so many other roles. I'm going to stick to only a couple of them. Just bear with me. Aromar.
Thanks, Emilia. I'll be very brief. I think that we really need to focus on trying to build what we've been talking about for a while. That is this moving from the international system to a interurban system, and 2 priorities within that. One is to address the question of the commons you've dealt with, but something which is a subtext which is very critical, and that is we have to look at the global financial system and how the intergovernmental financial system works within the nations we're talking about. Because without that, we can do planet, we can do prosperity, we can do solidarity, but without looking at the financial system and undoing it or redoing it, we may have some serious challenges. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Aromar. I think many other Ubuntus here in the room, but also my colleagues from around the world will very much agree with you. Deborah Roberts, co-chair of the Working Group 2 of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and many other things as well. Deborah, welcome. I know you have issues with your camera, but I thought we could hear you.
Yeah, I'm going to try and leave my camera on at least for this bit. Unfortunately, I'm in my office and the signal here is extremely weak. So what can I bring to this particular party? Well, I think my title says it all, a link back to the global assessments of those important commons, most notably climate change. This is a seminal year for advancing the global climate change agenda. It's absolutely critical that local and urban are part of that. Climate change is one thing you cannot self-isolate from. You certainly can't vaccinate a city against. So really important that we keep climate and our role in that on the agenda. Thanks, Emilia.
Thank you very much, Deborah. And I go ahead with Edgar Petersen, Director of the African Center for Cities and South African researcher in urban policy at the University of Cape Town. And Edgar has also joined us in our work around our global report on decentralization. Edgar, welcome.
Thank you, Emilia, and thank you for this wonderful way to kick off the year. I've certainly found it very stimulating to have to answer your difficult questions. So for me, I'm interested and want to push how we can all collectively reflect on how we animate radical imaginaries. For me, the crisis that we're confronted with across multiple levels is fundamentally a cultural one. And if we can really explore what it means to animate, to activate, to let loose radical imaginaries, I think that will feed into a lot of the technical policy issues that we've already listed. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And now we go to Jorge Pérez Jaramillo, who is currently working as an advisor of the Department of Antioquia in Colombia. Jorge.
Hello to everyone. I'm so glad to be here. And my idea would be to congratulate the organization because in the declaration of Durban, I think we have clear agenda for a long time term. But what I might suggest today is to consider the education for the future citizens of this global organization. So I will promote the creation or the co-creation a network of academic and universities around the globe to be part of this movement and to co-create research, workshops, and developments for innovative development of our cities around the world, and also to spread the knowledge we already have.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jorge. Maria Fernanda Espinosa, you don't need introductions, Maria Fernanda, and you are so active in many things, among others, facilitating important discussions around the Forum on Generation Equality. You have also been the president of the UN General Assembly. Maria Fernanda, the floor is yours. I see you're frozen. I don't know if we have I think there might be technical problems right now. Maria Fernanda, are you with us? She has now disappeared. Well, I am sure that she will be back. Let us move ahead a little, and after this inspiring inspiring feedback, let me give you some thoughts as well on where we feel the mood is in the network, in this global network, and how we see some of the instruments that we have as very useful instruments for you to share ideas with political leadership, but also with the teams that are behind the actions of local councils and regional governments all over the world. The network feels a kind of a foundational moment at the moment. We feel that many of the issues that we have been pushing for and promoting during many years. I will get back to you, Maria Fernanda, in a second. I see you are back. Can you hear us now?
Oh,
Good.
very well, thank you.
So I will get back to you in a sec. So we feel we are in this foundational moment where we realize that many of the models that we have been trying to promote and many of the transformations that we always knew were necessary around human rights, ecological transition, the models of local economic development, etc. They are now at a moment where we feel we've got a very empirical example of how impactful those are and how important it is to make transformation that allow us to guarantee, for instance, housing for everybody, but also make sure that you have access to health care for everybody, how equality can actually impact a lot the capacity that we have to react as a society to a pandemic of this type, and how issues like health are also very much connected with parts of local service provision that we had never considered before. Maybe we did on the ground, but not so much in the broader political discussion. And knowing that our towns and cities would never be the same, also knowing that we will require sacrifices to be able to change this model, we want to continue working in the path of the Sustainable Development Goals as a very important framework for the construction of a new social contract. Which we feel now we need to enhance and enlarge a little bit. This is what we call the Pact for the Future. And the Pact for the Future we identify with three critical axes, and of course there might be more, and they are all very linked with each other, and that structure of how we conceive the Pact for the Future is how we have chosen to structure the discussions in this session today. A pact for people, a pact for planet, and a pact for government. We will need to reform governmental institutions and the relations between the different spheres of government if we want to respond to emergencies, but also impact the multilateral system. And we will need to change our relationship with nature if we want this world to be sustainable. We need to do all of that with people at the center. That's the short version of it. So we will first give the floor to Maria Fernanda to give a very brief 2 sentences of where you see yourself in this work with local and regional governments and UCLG, and then we'll go immediately to Vice Mayor of Barcelona, Laia Bonet, to get a real local perspective from these ideas that we have been sharing. Maria Fernanda.
Well, sorry that I had a technical glitch, but greetings to all. Thank you, Emilia. And as a UCLG Ubuntu advisor, I think that the Pact for the Future must include a call to ensure that the voice and the agency of local and regional governments are part and parcel of the retooling of global governance arrangements, and that the multilateral system, including the reform of the United Nations, has a built-in mechanism to ensure a sustained and meaningful voice and participation of local and regional governments. That would be my pitch, Emilia. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have forgotten that we still have one more Ubuntu advisor. Sorry, Barbara Samuels. I was thinking about you when we were touching upon the issue of finance, but I didn't give you the floor. Please, Barbara, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here because this tracks with two parts of my professional life. One is finance, managing the entire international portfolio in 100 countries of Chase Manhattan Bank. And most recently, working to define finance roadmaps for local governments, regional governments in two studies, which I can share with you. One is for the Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa that outlines step-by-step for 10 climate sectors, who does what, how do we really address the market and political failures? So that's one part. The other part is in 2001, the UN asked me to help them as a pro bono advisor to set up the financing for development process. And I ended up being the director, then the vice chair of the business steering committee. And so I worked very hard on a pro bono basis with the UN in that regard on all three resolutions, Monterey, Doha, and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, including paragraph 34, that we pushed with the Gates Foundation and FMDV to actually get for the first time the inclusion of local governments as an integral part. So that's key to my heart. I've also worked very closely with the African Union, AUDA-NEPAD, the development agency, and that is a new opportunity to expand from their multi-regional projects, and they're open to this. I worked with the CEO there, Dr. Mayaki, in terms of integrating the regionalization, the localization of projects as part of PETA projects, adding them in. We have to look at this as a whole integrated chain. So this is key to my heart. Also have worked with the OECD and with the G20. So I think we need to connect these, and it's the right path, the only path. And if we don't get it right, we all fail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And we do hope you can help us connecting those dots. I will show you later on a list of the mechanisms that we have thought about to deepen policy development in the organization, to help our political leadership through policy discussions in a safe environment where they don't need to face the criticism and the press of the domestic daily pressures. So that's the whole idea, that will help each other to connect the dots. Thank you very much, Ubuntu advisors. And now, Vice Mayor, thank you very much for being with us today, Laia, as part of this Cities Are Listening process that we have started, learning from each other. How does all this sound for Barcelona, Laia?
Good afternoon from Barcelona, and although I'm not sure we are still allowed to say it, Happy New Year to everyone. And thank you, Emilia, and the UCLG Secretariat for convening this meeting, which I think will be very, very useful to provide a broad and strong vision for the year ahead. We all know the situation is extremely difficult. We know the reasons, and we have experienced the consequences of the health, economic, and social crisis. Let me share with you what I think are the three most relevant challenges we are facing in Barcelona, particularly those that have an international dimension. First, we needed to make sure that the depth of the social crisis coming out of the health and economic crisis was clearly understood at the national and international level. And we also needed to ensure that the response was radically different to the 2008 crisis. In short, that means more social spending to protect vulnerable populations rather than austerity. And that, I would say, we have achieved it here in Barcelona, in particular, thanks to an intense advocacy work at the EU level. The second challenge that stems from the current situation is the urban transformation we need to undertake for a bold ecological transition. This includes policies such as large-scale building retrofitting, urban planning, and mobility measures like Barcelona's super blocks, and investing in electric mobility, such as the tram, and so on. The issue here is that these measures are either politically controversial or massively expensive, and in most cases, they are both. So what we expect from our international action and networks is to showcase those actions that work best and to provide international legitimacy to them so as we can defend them locally. And we also expect to be able to address directly national governments in relevant fora such as COP and get them to raise their own ambition and invest in city transformations. And third, of course, there is the challenge of technology and digitalization. It is a complex, multidimensional issue, but I would say that we need to make a priority of it in any and all preparations for the future. We need to place data, privacy, and the relation between what is private and what is public at the heart of any new social contract. And we also need to bring to the global table the need for bold digital inclusion policies. Otherwise, we risk turning digitalization into another layer of inequality to our societies. How does this relate to the Pact for the Future? Well, it lays the ground for a renewed rights agenda. In fact, if I could say only one thing about the Pact for the Future, I would strongly emphasize that the rights agenda is the right agenda for a number of reasons. First, because it can be understood by citizens, and we need this more than ever. International relations from cities is not seen as particularly relevant by city inhabitants, although we know it is. It will be difficult to politically and democratically sell investing time and money in an international process if it cannot be understood by our communities. And the rights language is not only understandable, it is empowering. Second, because it is about time that we push for an update of the international human rights system. Climate rights, digital rights, social rights, they all need to be included or broadened in a context of the challenges of the 21st century and the climate emergency we are facing. We at the local level are dealing with its effects, and we need international frameworks to change as well. Third, because the rights agenda is also a duties agenda, duties on the administration side, I mean. And I'm sure that if we are to renew the democratic social pact at the local level, it needs to be done on the basis of a strengthened welfare state with strong public services. And the only way to ensure legally binding long-term results on this is recognizing communities' rights that are actionable and that impose obligations on both the public and the private sectors. So in my view, the Pact for the Future needs to be a rights agenda, a process that has a clear purpose and that is understood both by multilateral institutions and local communities. Let me finalize with a couple of thoughts on a more strategic note. First, I wanted to share with you that I have some doubts about the idea of moving from listen to cities to cities are listening as organization. The truth is that we local governments listen and talk and partner with our communities on a daily basis. This is what local democracy is about. And this is only increasing with the dominance of social media in our public debate. We are held accountable every single minute of our mandate. Instead, I would say that the Listen to Cities motto is more relevant than ever. And UCLG will continue to be relevant for its members as long as it provides the dialogue spaces we need to talk to national governments, the international and donor community, and yes, the private sector. Cities are facing an incredibly difficult situation worldwide. What we need from our international organization is to help us shape the right regulatory and narrative frameworks, support us in getting access to funding, and facilitating spaces to hold the private sector accountable for their activities' impact on our communities and livelihoods. What I mean is that Barcelona needs UCLG and the municipal movement, for instance, to go together to United Nations Human Rights Council and advocate for digital rights to be included in the debates and guarantee mechanisms. Another example, what we need is to direct the attention of the philanthropic sector and the donor community towards innovative policies that need to be tested to find effective solutions to current challenges in a context of budgetary restrictions. We need external funding to experiment because current social needs do not leave much room for maneuver financially. The Pact for the Future will best galvanize our movement if it's a political, rights-based process that offers solutions and concrete goals and outputs. UCLG has done this work in the past, and I'm totally sure, completely sure, is in an excellent shape to do it again. And this is it. I know it took a bit over the allocated time, but those are things I felt this was the appropriate place to say. Thank you, Amelia.
It has been totally worth it, Vice Mayor. Thank you very much for your inputs, for the clear mandate, but also for the trust expressed. It's funny that you have also tackled this issue of listen to cities. Cities are listening. We were having this discussion with the policy team just a few minutes ago about what the first tweet should be. And we decided that we need to keep using both, because the reason why the international community needs to keep listening to cities is that we are listening to communities, and that's also the kind of role that we hope to play in the discussion at the international level. We are not saying that local and regional governments are able to transform everything or to put everything in motion, but we certainly feel that we can be the catalyzer of the type of transformative movement that you need towards a new pact, with concrete actions, but also with this tryout of policies. I think this is very interesting, Laia, that you bring this. I mean, this impossibility for failure or experimentation that we have in the political life is extremely difficult, and is probably no longer in agreement with the times that we are living in. So we have taken good notice of this. I hope the Ubuntu advisors as well have been able to capture these very important messages. Allow me to show you one slide, because you have emphasized a lot about rights, and we talk about a new generation of rights as well. We feel that the human rights need further expansion. It's not that we need to rethink them, but they need to also evolve, like in the shape of digital rights. Massimo, do you have that slide over there for the policy councils? Because I want you to see how we have structured our discussions, and you will see a lot of topics that are very close to rights. So we have 5 policy councils in UCLG right now. One around the right to the city and inclusive territories. And this is the policy council where many of the discussions around implementation of human rights and this new generation will be taking place. We've got one on opportunities for all, with emphasis on culture and city diplomacy, which is the broader look to our equality agenda as well, and fair development. We've got one on territorial multi-level governance and sustainable financing, looking at the details of how to foster governing in partnership and co-governance, safer, resilient, and sustainable cities capable of facing crisis. Is another of our policy councils. And then the implementation of the new urban agenda. This is a new policy council that has been approved in our last meeting of the World Council. And I have to say, I think they are very much up with times. I mean, they really fit into the current debate. But these are policy councils that were defined already in 2017. So you can see how the municipal movement have been discussing these very timely issues for quite a while now. We only hope that these new lessons that we are learning will be taken into account in these discussions. And we feel that the Ubuntu advisors can play a strong role in inspiring the discussions within these policy councils. I hope that you agree with me. Allow me now to go to Sian, to the head of the Friendship Association of Sian, our colleague Chiki, who is always up late on behalf of UCLG. And she, we want to invite you to provide your views from a city like Sian, a different context, but very similar objectives for us all. Welcome.
Thank you, Amelia. Dear colleagues, dear friends, and advisors, nice to meet you all here after holiday season. And thank you for inviting me to speak at this session from local and regional government's perspective. Urban governance is, as is always known, a complex process, especially for a city with a 12 million population like Xi'an, making it hard to manage during COVID-19. However, the government has implemented a series of measures to minimize the impact of pandemic on social and economic development, giving top priority to people and their lives. Currently, there are sporadic cases from high-risk regions. Xi'an has been dealing with these challenges seriously and controlling the situation well with the application of big data and effective policies. People across the world have increasingly come to see that we are sharing a common stake and the need to stand together in the face of difficulties. More and more members of the international community now choose solidarity over division, openness over isolation, and cooperation over confrontation. In terms of urban governance, concerning its complexity, we believe overemphasizing one aspect will definitely lose the other. Therefore, I'd like to share a 10 new focuses policy in 2021 in Xi'an to expect some contributions in this meeting. Thank you. So first, focus on opening to the outside world. We will expand opening platforms and channels to strengthen opening industries. We will also carry on our Local for Action Hub programs on young leader training program, degree program, and call on university also associations to include the introduction of SDGs into the curriculum of higher education system to accelerate the implementation of SDGs by the young. Second, focus on the ecological environment. Xi'an has values ecological and environment protection. In this year, we will continue implementing the programs to a forest 5 square kilometers in Qingling Mountain to complete 232 programs on river improvement to further reduce carbon emissions and to make the city greener. Third, focus on urban planning. We adhere to the principle of the World Vision, international standards, and Xi'an characteristics to comprehensively improve urban functions and quality. Technologies like 5G, big data, and artificial intelligence will be fully adopted to the urban planning. Fourth, focus on the business environment. Fifth, focus on major projects. 740 municipal key projects will be annually investment of 61 billion US dollars will be guided to start efficiently. Sixth, focus on the advanced manufacturing industry. This year, 6 pillar industries of city, including manufacturing industries in electronic information, automobile, aerospaces, new materials and new energy, food and biological medicine will be promoted. Seventh, focus on the culture and tourism integration. Xi'an has and will always shoulder the responsibility to invigorate its culture and tourism industry to upgrade the in-depth integration of the two. We will also launch our 7 Keys workshop with UCLG Culture Committee to find out how culture can influence SDGs in Xi'an. We're quite excited about that. Eighth, focus on the integration of urban and rural development. We'll keep consolidating and extending the achievement of poverty alleviation and accelerating the development of the rural areas. Ninth, focus on sustaining and improving people's well-being. People-centered cooperation are actively pursued. Sustaining and improving people's well-being is a priority for Xi'an. Education, healthcare, and elderly care will be highlighted in 2021. 10th, focus on scientific and technological innovation and the training of the talents. Ladies and gentlemen, struggle creates history, hard work makes bright future. Let's raise to each other, let's raise to each challenge and create new progress. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. Very interesting issues in that list, such as this rural-urban development, which I think is very interesting. Also, for a very key topic on the agenda for us this year, which is democratic food access and food systems. I think this is a topic that our movement in the urban era needs to embrace. The development of cities cannot take place without the rest of the development to take place as well. And I am delighted to see that also in your list. Also this issue around culture and linking that with new tourism and talent, stimulating talent. So many interesting issues, and I certainly hope that in our conversations this year, we can also inspire Xi'an to see where those major investments for major projects need to go. Because as Vice Mayor Bonet was saying, sometimes some of these big infrastructure projects are either or too expensive or too polemic. Let us hope that we can help each other in fostering the right type of transformation. So thank you very much for that. I am now very pleased to give the floor to my colleague, the Secretary General for United Cities and Local Governments Africa. I saw him a minute ago. Jean-Pierre, are you still around? Yes, you're coming back. I am very happy to give you the floor to facilitate the next segment. As I was saying at the beginning, we have just tried to structure these discussions simply because you need some kind of reference to start off. But obviously we know very well that you cannot detach people from planet and from government. So feel free to provide feedback for the different aspects of the pact. Jean-Pierre, your perspective, and I leave you with Ana and Jorge. You are mute, Jean-Pierre.
Sorry for that. Thank you. It is a very important meeting and a brainstorming meeting, and building pact for a future means a lot for us. And Emilia, you introduced your word by saying that at the moment the world stopped. So there are two alternatives. Is stop and go the same way, even accelerate to catch up. This is one option, meaning go back to consumerism, meaning go back to competition for growth, meaning care for just myself and don't have consideration for injustice. Or another path, to bifurcate from consumerism to work towards a more just and sustainable world, and to reduce the way we consume for others to live. Where are we situated? Where are local governments situated here? Do we care really for the future if we don't resolve this equation? And what I will do is to try and get these 5 minutes pitches from Ana Falou, from Jorge Perez Jaramillo, from Farida Shahid, because we really need to know if, as we think, we are at the best level to consolidate this new thinking for the future, or are we not? Ana Falou, can you tell us, what do you think? Where is she? I don't see her. Anna, are you here?
Yes, she's here. She's making signs, but unmute yourself, Ana. Pon micrófono.
Sorry, here I am.
Okay.
No. Okay. Shall I continue this dialogue, Emilia? Well, I think I appreciate so much, Jean-Pierre, your comment. I think that if we go to Laia Bonet and from Barcelona, and to your comment, we are putting the center of the question into the agenda. We need to look how we need to define how we want to build this pact for the future. And we need a new pact for the future. And the possibilities are, or we stay as it is, and which is not possibility for the world, because the world have shown that this destroying nature and people, predation, we say in Spanish, I don't know, on nature, on material city, on the people, is not working. I mean, the obscenity of the disparities in the world, the obscenity of the inequalities is not the way. We need a new pact. I agree absolutely with you. And we need to look into this world of injustice. And in this world of injustice, we need, and I want to insist, better equality. We need to feminize politics. As Emilia said, feminism is not talking of women only. Feminism is a democratic, inclusive concept that is interrogating the way we are building and caring for the humanity. So we need a new perspective. We need better equality, redistribution, security, care. These are the mass. Then we have to discuss what are the commons. What are the commons we need to prioritize? What are the actions we need to put at the first point of the agenda? But this should be our vision, the vision of a more equal world, an equal world for the indigenous people, an equal world with less racial colonial approach, a better world that it will be less patriarchal, because we need to talk about this. This is what is expressed in each territory, in each city, and we need to interrogate. That is why I agree that we need to listen and to be listened, because to be listened is to listen the voices of the cities, the voices of the networks, the voices of the women, the voices of the young people saying we don't want no one more killed, no one more women killed. Yeah, this fabulous movement in the world against violence, for care, for security, for better caring of the environment. Yeah, I think these are the real central issues. And of course, we need to expend more in social protection. But we need to also define which are the priorities in the social protection we need to tackle in this unjust society. Yeah? Where are the migrants, the refugees in this world? And we need to question ourselves. And we have leaders, very committed leaders in UCLG. And with those very committed leaders and women committed leaders that have demonstrated much more sensibility vis-a-vis the pandemic. This is what the papers are saying, the media are saying. Yeah? And we have to really see, and not, please, far from any essentialism. Women are not better than men. It's a construction, a social construction. Yeah? And that social construction brought this empathy into women that are, of course, sensitive and committed to human rights. And I want to say also that rights, as Laila put it, rights should be at the center of the agenda. But we need to put that, bring it down from the rhetoric also in our local action. And I think that our governments that are very good examples, like Ada Colau in Barcelona, like Ana Hidalgo in Paris, like our friend in Bogota, Claudia Lopez, talking about care, talking about everyday life, giving politics to the domestic and quotidian life, saying we need to work on care systems, integrated care system for the society. So we have very good examples. We have very good examples we can analyze, we can learn from them, and we can learn from the mistakes also. So from the political dimension, I would say that UCLG has decisive leadership, that we are willing to join forces, to bring responses from their capacities, to listen those voices from the cities, the voices of the women, of the youth, of the migrants, of the refugees, that diversity that is always omitted, or most of omitted, yeah? So we need to really bring more women to the table. The table is set, but we need to make that table more diverse. We need that table be at the multilateral scenario, yeah, scene, as Maria Fernanda Espinosa said. Of course, that is central. The local governments need to have a place in that table, a relevant place, a legitimate place, but also that table needs to be more diverse. Also, that tables need to bring more women and greater diversity, the plurality of voices. I think these are the issues we need to debate. I will leave it in here, but we really have not to lose that this pandemic showed us that we have a different impact of the pandemic in the people. And if our lemma is not to leave anyone behind, we really need to work for cities that will be places of security, cities that will care, cities that will be co-created, cities that will allow our dreams and our opportunities for everybody. I think this is the main message we should discuss. I don't know if this is Jean-Pierre giving some answer to this very complex question you put, yeah? We need commitment in the...
Anna, thank you very much for your inputs. It was very, very instructive and enlightening. I remember a while ago, and it was at the beginning of this organization under the leadership of Mayor Anna. I remember the mayor of Paris and mayor the mayor of Istanbul. We published an advert to present UCLG, and we were very proud of this advert. And it was saying, resolve a problem at the local level, and it is resolved for the world. We said this is the right level to address anything, and it is treated at that level, then it is treated for the world. Is that right? Because what we are saying now is that, hey, go to the right table where you are not the right table. But in our advert, we were saying that the place to resolve our problem, be it global or local, is the local level. Now we are begging to go to the right table. Where's the right table? Maybe I can come to Jorge and ask him to get further deeper in this argument that maybe it's the place to find a new way. We said right base, we said equality, we said not rhetoric, but implementation, and we said, well, this is the place to change, and we say no, but go to the right table to change. Well, Jorge, what are your thoughts here?
Voy a hablar en español. Mil gracias, Jean-Pierre. Bueno, yo creo que estamos enfrentando con la realidad de la pandemia un asunto sumamente importante, y es que lo primero es que tenemos muchas pandemias enfrente y que esta pandemia crítica lo que hace es que expone o nos expone a todos, a la comunidad global, a las otras pandemias que tenemos ampliamente diagnosticadas: la extrema inequidad, la extrema segregación socioespacial y territorial, la precariedad de la urbanización global creciente y lo que eso significa en términos de cambio climático, que probablemente es la peor o la más significativa pandemia. Entonces yo creo que estamos enfrentando un asunto que nos reta muchísimo, y es que yo llamo esto la ciudad aplazada. Tenemos suficiente conocimiento, tenemos suficientes ejemplos, tenemos suficientes referentes en el mundo global como para que pudiéramos avanzar mucho más rápidamente en encontrar soluciones para lo que nos está ocurriendo. Yo dije al principio en el saludo que creo que la declaración de Durban y el conjunto de documentos y de planteamientos que la organización ha desarrollado en mi opinión, están en un nivel de madurez y de profundidad extremadamente valioso. Y es por eso que me atreví a focalizarme hoy. Yo incluso preparé una presentación, pero creo que después la comparto por texto y ustedes la leerán. Es muy breve. Pero lo que me interesa es decir que yo quisiera promover la idea en Ubuntu hoy de que diéramos el salto a vincular a la organización con el mundo de la academia. Y voy a decir por qué. Como vivimos en un mundo de muchas grandes ciudades, pero ciudades muy jóvenes, que se han formado con enormes precariedades en términos políticos, en términos sociales y en términos ambientales, pues en Medellín, en mi ciudad, que vivimos una crisis profunda, que yo no dudo en calificar una buena expresión de lo que es la crisis global urbana, aprendimos que de la mano de la ciudadanía es posible transformar muchas cosas. Y entonces creo que implicar al mundo de las universidades y al mundo académico, no solo en términos de formación ciudadana, sino especialmente en términos de la experimentación con el conocimiento para encontrar soluciones alternativas locales, aplicables y que impliquen al mundo del conocimiento en la política y en la gestión pública, como hicimos en Medellín en los años 90, cuando esta ciudad desesperadamente no encontraba salidas no solo a la violencia, que es lo conocido, sino a una crisis urbana extremadamente grave en términos de inequidad social, en términos de precariedad, en términos de ausencia de democracia, en términos de precariedad de políticas públicas. Entonces he pensado que una contribución hoy es que podría ser que la organización activara realmente la creación de una red global. Ahí está, por ejemplo, Aromar, que desde la India sabe que ha participado con Medellín y con muchas otras ciudades en red, en investigaciones y proyectos. Creo que podríamos activar eso y volver a UCLG también en una entidad que centralice la reflexión global sobre qué hacer, pero también con un balance fundamental, y ahí termino, es que eso forma la ciudadanía del futuro. Lo que aprendimos nosotros en los años 90 en las universidades fue que tomar la ciudad como pregunta, tomar la ciudad como problema, generó una enorme cantidad de respuestas y de experimentaciones que luego se aplicaron por esos jóvenes estudiantes que luego fueron ciudadanos. Es decir, yo creo que formar la ciudadanía del futuro es un complemento fundamental para la realidad que estamos viviendo. Esa sería, digamos, mi propuesta. Y creo que, como dije al principio, la organización tiene una amplia y muy profunda agenda ya elaborada. Gracias.
Thank you so much. And I hear you. And this idea of creating a large network of the academia scientists that can give direction or information on the way forward is welcome. And I think it is important to do that because we need to alert the international community. And I want to copy what our people from the climate have done. They created an international panel on climate change. Why don't we create an international panel on urban change, on local government change? And this can also feed into building a future that is different and with knowledge. Because if you don't have knowledge, you have feelings, but really sometimes you take decisions based not on the reality, but on your own feelings. So I'm very happy of this proposal, and maybe we'll go further with this, the special rapporteur on cultural rights, Farida Shahid to also give some of the direction that she thinks you can be taking.
So hi everyone, apologies for late joining. I had an emergency meeting with our Ministry of Human Rights. So I'm afraid I'm coming into this completely unprepared because I have not had a chance to think. But my basic concern has been, especially given the experiences under COVID, I really think we need to change how we relate to each other as communities at the grassroots. And I think that means changing how local governments function and how the local governments are linked to your national, provincial, whatever it is, in higher levels. If we do not bring people together at that level to be more sustainable, to be helping each other, I think we're not going to be sustainable as a planet in the long term. So I think we need to have ideas of how do we connect with each other in ways which are supportive. Here, for instance, the work that I've done in my country around COVID and the impact, especially on women, the increasing gender-based violence, the lack of security of livelihood, etc. Those communities that responded best were those which were connected with each other and supporting each other, especially those who were excluded. So like religious minorities, persons living with disabilities, somehow those voices do not seem to be reflected sufficiently in any of our governance systems. And unless they are, we're always going to be leaving people behind. So my plea would be somehow, and I think in that actually, not just because I'm the former rapporteur on cultural rights, but I think cultural activities, cultural engagement with each other, cultural infotainment type of things are so vital right now. So I think that's something that my 2 cents worth, completely off the cuff, is this.
This is fantastic. You're saying where you are, when we are connected, you can face difficulties together. And you're saying the connection safeguard also your culture, your self-esteem. And this, it's highly needed in a world where culture is now denied because of the COVID. And there is a serious request from the cultural sector to see what to do in case this situation goes on and on. How do we connect with culture? Maybe you have some ideas on that, Farida.
Well, I think what I was trying to say also is that I think actually looking at what happened during COVID, some of the most moving things have been people using cultural expressions to relieve tension, to connect with others, whether it's been on the streets or it's been through virtual means. I think there's a real relief that is given and a self-expression that's given. The thing is to somehow ensure that the differences of cultures, because we're all diverse, the diversity of cultures within communities have a space so that there's an understanding of each other's humanity, which is brought about, and we can come together to identify what are our collective sort of ambitions. We did some research in which we used, I don't know if people are similar, which is called the SALT approach. And it is something which stimulates thinking. It's a different way of engaging with people during the COVID thing. And one of the first questions you ask is, what is humanity? What does humanity mean to people? And when you get those answers, if you start talking about how humanity, what they've done that makes them proud in whatever, the period of COVID or in their lives, you will find 90% of them talk about what they have done for others. And the realization that they do have some power, even if we're very disempowered, we do have some power to change things immediately around us. And that gives them a sense that if you work together and you have a common vision, then we can achieve far more than we do individually. And I think that's something which for us was extremely, to me, it was very touching to see that the differences, when you talk about humanity, everyone that answered us, whether they were from literate or illiterate, whether they were from well-educated backgrounds, from diverse places across Pakistan, had the same feeling and understanding that it's about having no discrimination on any basis whatsoever, being kind, and including several people said, not just to other people, but having that understanding to be good to the environment, to animals, to whatever, treating things, that is what humanity is. And if we can somehow connect that back, I think that cultural expression of what our humanity is needs to come forth in all the diversity that it has. But I think to me that was a great learning during this terrible period of COVID, was that actually people do think of humanity in very positive ways. And if we can harness that energy, there is a way to go forward.
Thank you so much for this, the wisdom that you are putting here. It's very inspiring. I don't know if Emilia, I have spare time, but I think my time is over.
Yeah, well, it is, but you want to leave some thoughts with us before we move to the segment on nature.
Well, my thought are that, frankly, we local governments leaders and the local people are the custodians of humanity, because this is where people experience all the benefits and all the dangers of what is happening across the world. So I really think that if we solve problems at the local level, they are solved for the world. And this should be recognized by the world. And this is why we are saying, let's reverse the way we were thinking. We were saying before, think global, act local. But we're realizing that it's only when you act local that you can think global. So it is a total change of mindset that you have to educate our people, not only to be proud of what they are doing as local authorities, because they are the one that will change the world, and we have to educate the others that a line minister cannot understand what is the duty of a mayor, because the mayor connect, the line minister defend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre. Yes, we are trying to promote that paradigm shift indeed, that you also need to think locally and act globally to trigger true transformation. And this concept of custodians of humanity and sentinel of aspirations and dreams of communities is coming out very strongly also in the atmosphere of the discussions today. Very important messages in this first segment about the construct of community and the potential that you create if you empower people, is rights and duties, as Vice Mayor Bonet was explaining before, are very, very important in this discussion. And the right message and rights are not only the narrative or the message itself, but the empowerment that is there behind it. And I think Farida was also referring to that. If anything, during this pandemic, I have come to realize how many important things we can solve together if we take the comments into account. And I have to confess with great shame that I've been living in Barcelona for over 15 years, and I have only come to know my neighbors during this pandemic. That's a reality. But now I know them, and I know them closely, and I know the medicines that they use, and I know the help that they need. So I guess this is part of the discussions. Important proposals also from Jorge on those on this academic community, and I guess Ubuntu is our embryo for that, and the work that we have been developing in the Global Observatory on Local Democracy and Decentralization, what we call our gold process is not only a report that we produce every 3 years, but a whole community of thinkers and academics that are following our work and help us progress. But I think you're absolutely right, Jorge, that we need to see how we introduce that kind of innovative thinking more into our policy discussion mechanism. I think the role that you need to play also within our policy councils is extremely critical. Also very important to now totally identify with this notion that inequality is no longer acceptable. And if you go from this parameter, then there is a lot of change that we need to trigger. And then the next question that Jean-Pierre was asking is, at what table do we need to sit? And I guess, Jean-Pierre, we have decided as a community that we don't have the appropriate table. We want to be at the UN table, we want to be in the international table, but this process towards a new pact for the future, it aims at creating a new type of table where communities, the international community, civil society, and local governments, we create our own environment. And those of you that were involved in the Habitat 3 process might identify with this thought as well. So very important issues that we have been discussing, but we haven't talked about a very critical topic, which I hope we can go into now, and that is the need to change the way that we relate with nature, and the need to understand the kind of transformation, also personal changes that we need to make as a society to actually make our world sustainable. And this is where this second act and the second part of the conversation is very relevant. Fostering a new relationship with nature. And I want Deborah Roberts and Edgar Peterson to help us with that. And I know that all of you are related to the topic, but I thought with Deborah and Edgar, we could go deeper on this discussion. So, Deborah, do you want to start? Because you have also been a very important promoter of this notion of bringing academy into decision making, also particularly in relation to climate. I have to confess that during this crisis, that relationship between the academy and the expertise and political decision making is very tense. It's not being easy. So what do you choose? Health over social protection and economic protection? These are tough discussions, and they were tough also, they are still tough within the context of climate change. Any thoughts on this, Deborah? How do we go on with this?
Thanks very much, Amelia. And I'll leave my camera off because my link has weakened considerably. I'm a bit like Farida. I'll talk off the cuff because I never received the briefing notes for this particular session.
Oh,
it's only
right.
Who sent it to me, so that I wouldn't act surprised when you called on me. I think what we need to be wary of is obviously the COVID pandemic was a big surprise to a lot of people. I think there were some scientists who had been warning about such a crossover for a long time, but essentially it was a surprise that has refocused our attention and our resources on the issues of global and human health and ultimately environmental health. What is really important to realize is that shouldn't distract us from some of the even larger challenges that lie ahead of us. And I said rather flippantly in my initial pitch, you know, climate change is not something you can self-isolate from, or indeed you cannot inoculate. Hopefully by the end of the year, substantial numbers of us will be vaccinated, but waiting in the wings are in fact big challenges from climate change and probably even larger challenges from biodiversity loss. And there's some delightful memes floating around on social media, which show a swimmer swimming with a shark underneath them, and that's marked COVID, but below the COVID shark are even bigger sharks labeled climate change and biodiversity loss. So I think it's important that while we focus on health and community and integration, that we don't lose sight of some of the bigger challenges that await us. Certainly amongst those is climate change, and UCLG already has a really good legacy in that regard, in helping build probably the initial bridge between the worlds of scientific research linked to climate change and the world of practice. And that really came through UCLG's role in the conference that was held in 2018 in the city of Edmonton in Canada, which focused on the issue of cities and climate change science. It certainly was a first for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It had never seen a gathering of a co-sponsored meeting of that size. We had over 700 people participating in that. And for several days, we saw for the first time the world of academia and science talking with the world of policy and practice. And having that conversation, that global conversation of which UCLG was one of the 9 founding partners, has a profound impact on the way the scientists doing the assessment for the IPCC now think of cities. Because cities, obviously, no matter how large they are well below the scale of consideration of a global assessment. They don't appear on the maps when you're doing a global assessment. And so a lot of work needed to be done to begin to raise that urban profile. And so there's a very important legacy from that meeting, which was the Global Research and Action Agenda, which has come out and identified key research gaps for the urban community and the scientific community that need to be thought about and addressed if we are to move forward, in terms of dealing with the issue of climate change at the local level. One of those was informality, and that was the first time, certainly in the scientific debate, that informality appeared as a critical issue for consideration in the urban landscape when we were talking about climate change. What is important in terms of the opportunity that UCLG has now, as I said in my introduction, this is a key moment. Yet again, almost a mini Paris as we go to Glasgow. When we're thinking about increased global ambition, it's a real chance to think not only about the health of humanity, but the health of the planet again, in terms of increased climate ambition at the national level, is to ensure that that continuity of purpose remains, because urban areas, we're only going to be able to act locally if we have access to the scientific information that is relevant at our scale, that can inform innovation and practice. And that's really the next step in the journey of pulling academia and research together with policy and practice, is understanding what that need is and how that science can inform innovation and action at the local level. And I was in fact just on a discussion this morning with UN Habitat and the Global Covenant of Mayors, where and that group together with myself and others have been talking about a post-Edmonton series of actions, and there's now been an agreement that there will be a conference that flows on from Edmonton, which will now pick up really focus at the local level and the scientific needs at the local level that are required to inform innovation and practice. That meeting is geared for October at the end of this year. Certainly in my discussions today with you in Habitat and GCOM, they're seeing UCLG as playing a really critical role in the organization and participation of that event. And the idea is to move beyond Edmonton. Now we understand where the science is at. We engaged in a discussion with policy and practice is to really understand how that science has been acted on, how it underpins our innovation and and practice and what the needs are there and how we mobilize around that. And that's important not only in beginning to craft out a platform for local governments and cities to be able to access the science that they need to pursue evidence-based decision making, but importantly, it allows us to begin to influence the political or the global assessment process. As you know, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has committed to a special report on cities early in its 7th assessment cycle. And this next conference would be an important rallying call to rally information that could be ready for that particular assessment. And it's by providing that kind of information that local government can literally pull itself to the international negotiation table, because once the evidence is there, it begins to crack open opportunities for conversation. So I would say my input is a very practical one. UCLG already has a legacy in kicking the door open to build the first tentative steps between policy, practice, and science. There's a unique opportunity again this year to continue and evolve that, not only to feed into the COP, because that would be the idea behind the convening, but also to ready ourselves to ensure that we also influence the scientific assessment that will begin happening and focus directly on our scale of operation, which is local, urban, and human settlements generally, which will occur in 2023. Thanks very much, Amelia.
Thank you very much, Deborah. And indeed, I think we've got a very, very important task ahead, not only towards the international community, where we need to create these renovated spaces for dialogue. And I think the proposals that you have mentioned are clearly very important opportunities that we would contribute to. But I also think as UCLG, you know, being the biggest of the networks and gathering so many different types of members and sizes of members, we've got also a responsibility to promote a different kind of model, and that ecological transition model, I think, needs to be shaped also with data that is not usually available, and that is not the data from and the examples of the bigger cities only. But I think we have a very strong intermediary city kind of agenda that should be informing also the dialogue with the academic community. So really hope we can strengthen that aspect with the mechanisms that you just mentioned, and with our sister organizations that are very active in the field, like ICLEI and others, and then of course mechanisms like GCOM. So very, very important agenda. But I also feel we need to strengthen the narrative about the role that we can play in promoting this different relationship with nature in development. So hopefully we will be able to foster that and to make that part of the discussions of the COPs, even within the national determined contributions. There should be a part of the discussion that relates to this. Thank you very much, Deborah, and Edgar. You worked with us in many different moments of our history. You still do, and you have been working. In particular, I remember your important facilitation of one of our gold reports as we were preparing towards Habitat 3, that very important process for us. Edgar, how do you see these discussions and the situation, the context evolving, and what should we prioritize now? It seems to be that we have managed somehow to have the world listening to us and to realize the impact that we can have in transformation. What do you think our focus should be now?
Thank you, Emilia, and thank you for bringing up that painful memory that I worked on that gold report. I'm still in therapy, so.
You are not the only one that has that pain. I am sure my colleagues are around also feel that with you.
Would it be able to share one or two slides? Can I share screen? I'm disabled, so by the, yeah.
Colleagues, can we help Edgar with that?
Ah, great, got it. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Sure. Okay, so let me just first pick up on a connecting point in the spirit, Emilia, that you said this is meant to be a little bit more conversational also to where Deborah left off. And I think the point Jorge made about the need to build new networks that's more purpose-driven, and Elia's comments about it, the urgency and the importance of experimentation and so on. So I want to suggest that we maybe explore at another occasion the idea of city-level innovation systems. What do those things look like? And can we begin to build a shared understanding led by UCLG about the need to, if you will, break up this 20th century idea of national R&D systems, which still feeds industrial policy, and really begin to think, how do we localize the research and development to figure out what sustainable infrastructure means? What's alternative forms of land use management? How do we reimagine governance, citizenship, participation in the context of the digital commons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But do that in an open source frame so that as the experimentations occur, you also have access to it from anywhere in the world, and it can animate and feed conversations, processes, dynamics everywhere. Anyway, so it's just a very practical thing to connect maybe a few dots from what we've spoken earlier. To come to the provocation, and I did get the brief, unlike Deborah, so thank you. And I took your brief very seriously, so I was thinking about it, and I must say I was stumped, right? For me, what COVID has done is it's really kind of forced me to rethink and reassess all the arguments we've been making for decades, all the frameworks we so invested in and so forth. And I think that, you know, I'm still inhabiting that. So I don't feel particularly confident about anything, to be honest, as a perspective, as an insight and so on. And so I really welcome, you know, the modesty of the expectations that, you know, we're feeding into a conversation. We're not expected to have all the answers. And I want to start with just, I guess, this frame, which does still try and radically simplify things, but it also does maybe help us to think about sort of priorities, I guess. Sorry, I'm just trying to work out, yeah. So I think we can agree that, you know, the sort of top level challenges is to kind of locate the environmental question as particularly manifested in the climate emergency, alongside the question of work, inequality. And I think something that we struggle to have a meaningful language for is this question of meaning, is the question of identity. And we of course see, in the absence of effective frameworks to capture those things, how that gets mobilized by populist forces, particularly amidst uncertainty, heightened risk, and so forth. I think we now also understand from work in the last few years, and particularly as the environmental and the urban and the economic debates have started to intersect, that probably the most powerful lever for transformation are the trillions of investment that goes into infrastructure. Of course, we know that the vast majority of templates today still reproduce the extractive city, the extractive economy, but at least we now have the outlines of what alternative forms of infrastructure may be, even though our financing and economic architectures don't support that agenda yet. But we also know that sustainable infrastructure delinked from understanding the dynamics and the drivers of property and land use markets is a fundamental problem. And of course, both of those things depend on new forms of governance and enablement, you know, stuff you guys know very well. Now, we have a vague sense of what the outcome is we're looking for: new forms of living, new forms of cultural confidence, of connectivity and well-being. We use a rights frame to capture some of that. And I think we need to debate whether that always animates enough in cultural terms. I agree that it's very powerful and it has incredible protective and mobilizing capacity, but it may still, in certain senses, be somewhat alienating, I think, for some communities. But of course, the real challenge we face is the distribution question. We know that almost 70% of the global population subsist on only 3% of global wealth. So the question is how to do all of these things differently with such a small proportion of the world's population in control of the vast amount of resources and influence. And, you know, we don't need to look any further than what stock markets are doing in the midst of COVID and in the midst of economies grinding to a halt and going into negative growth territories to remind us just of what the material effects of those things are. So to come to the point of the environment, I want to just explore two ideas. And the first is that for me, environmental action has to be understood fundamentally as a cultural act of becoming and placemaking, or new ways of thinking about how people root themselves in highly mobile and mediatized worlds. So importantly for UCLG, and linked to the question of the table and which table and new tables and so forth, is the urgent need to disconnect questions of citizenship from the nation state. That we have to build a language and a frame for thinking about citizenship in relation to a multiplicity of communities that is not necessarily bounded in the way that was imagined during the Westphalian negotiations. So why does this matter? For me, and going back to this question of the crisis of meaning, that becoming is about confronting the existential crisis that we see everywhere in the world in the context of accelerated technological change that is disconnected from effective political regulation, right? We know that our dominant institutions have no idea what to do with big tech. And if anything, they are rather in a very instrumental way trying to optimize it for its own functions of control and surveillance and so forth. And this is not the only question. There's broader questions, of course, in the context of the crisis of work, in the context of the intensification of the intersectionality of inequalities. And very importantly, I guess, is the crisis of politics, the crisis of trust in political institutions. So if we begin to think of the environmental urgency as an opportunity to rethink the promise of belonging, of sense making and so forth, I think we can begin to break through some of the established ways in which we operationalize these ideas, right? And so one example to illustrate this, rethinking our food systems as a highly localized initiative, but as something that reroutes and embodies the environmental question and allows us to rethink some of these other issues. The second point that I want to make is that environmental action should be understood as a down payment, if you will, on a new or an alternative economic system. And here the two key things we have to rethink and reimagine and remake is questions of ownership and value. And of course, the discussions we've had about the commons, you know, sort of prefigures some of this. But clearly at the heart of it, and the most urgent task, I would argue, which should live in these innovation ecosystems, is rethinking the question of private property and land. I don't have the time to go into that, and I can point to some interesting work that is being done by some colleagues on this, but this has to be a revolution in terms of how we think about these terms. And nothing short of a revolution will do for the reasons of inequality that I mentioned earlier. But the point that I want to sort of leave with you as a legacy of this is that we've got to understand that we are dealing with the cost of a cumulative compound legacy of the crisis of the devaluation of human life, and particularly the sort of instrumentalization of nature, right? And so if we look, for example, at this slide from Alistair Pavin, which shows you the way in which questions of regulatory control sits within a nested system of various systems that we've got to simultaneously undo and redo. And of course, this can't be one fell swoop sort of big thing. It's going to be through multiplicity of experimentations, right? Where we're going to aggregate the new theories and the new concepts. So finally then, I think that if we really want to begin to rethink, reimagine sort of these fundamental questions, it returns ultimately, again, Jorge's point, to how we rebuild our educational institutions. And here I'm talking about lifelong learning. And I would argue, and maybe quibble a little bit with Jorge, that we have to even sort of blow apart our university systems. We've got to rethink pre-schooling. We've got to really, really work with UNESCO and others to fundamentally understand that the civilizational transformation we're talking about is not possible without radical educational transformation. And I wonder what UCLG's leadership role might be in that regard. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Edgar. And I am so pleased that you found our expectation modest, because there is nothing modest about the proposals that you are making. So I cannot even imagine what you have proposed if the expectations wouldn't have been modest. Thank you very much for this proposal, which I really think it has a lot of synergies with some of the issues that colleagues have been putting through before. I would like there are many issues that with time and with the work of Ubuntu, we would need to further explore, certainly all worthwhile. There is one particular one which I think is very interesting, and that will sound very scary, I think, for national governments and for our action in the international community, and is this notion of disconnecting citizenship from member states. But at the end of the day, that is what it will entail if we want to continue pushing for a different role of local governments, for instance, in the management of migration, but not alone. In the new generation of human rights, for instance, and what do digital rights imply, we might need to look at a different concept of citizenship, and that we're calling for a global concept of citizenship, so that we don't find ourselves having more rights as a platform user than as a citizen elsewhere. So a very interesting concept, which I think we need to bring out carefully. And then this issue of the revolution of learning. You know, many of our members are already working in a network that is called Educating Cities, that understands the cities as an educating being as well. And I think we need to expand a little bit on this and see the potential of that. And finally, these city-level innovation systems and these labs in kind of open source. Our retreat is coming up pretty soon, and one of the things that we would like to bring to the retreat, last year we talked about synchronization of activity, and this year we want to bring the notion of how to work as interconnected platforms in open source, and how to enhance the traceability of what we do. It's a kind of augmented reality that we want to promote, which hopefully could help some of the points that Laia, but also the city of Xi'an have been making about how important they find it to find not only the narrative in the international community, but the testing space. So very, very interesting things here, all connected to nature, to the links between that part of nature and communities, people. Very, very interesting indeed. Thank you for this. We don't have much time. I would like to give a round to the other Ubuntus to react to all of this, but let us finish off with the list and see whether we can still manage to get some feedback. Allow me to go to Aromar, and this would be part of the segment on government. Aromar, you've brought to our table something that we have already been using in our narrative, in our policy documents, this migration from the international concept to the interurban concept. We've discussed this. I think our membership are really starting to embrace this concept. But if there is one area where I think we have gone back in the time of the pandemic, is in this very concept. It's a personal opinion. The role that we can play in that, because everything that has happened internationally has been states have gone back to closing borders. States have gone back to taking decisions without taking into account the connectivity between the cities. So I feel as if the global citizen in us is a bit hurt. I myself have seen my freedom limited, also at personal level, not being able to commute to my family in another country, for instance, like most of you, I guess. So I am wondering, is this really hurting this notion that we were trying to promote? How do we tackle maybe this bump in our narrative, Aromar? What is next for us?
Thanks, Amelia. Actually, what you're saying in a sense touches on what Edgar's just dealing with. So in a sense, this is a time of deep crisis and disruption. And very often in deep crisis and disruption, you see sort of conventional systems falling back on old narratives and old frames of governance, etc. So citizenship is a classic example of that, right? Through the 90s and the 2000s, we find a more global world and an embracement of the global citizen. And then you have a global crisis. In fact, COVID is a classic, global crisis. It's a perfect storm, whether it's across the SDG system or across the global system. Starts in one place, peri-urban, and then expands very rapidly because of an interconnected world into the rest of the world. So if you look at these points of crisis, I would say, this is when the opportunity for these pacts of the future emerge. So if you look back 100 years, the municipal movement starts in whatever, 1913, 14. You have the First World War, the end of a whole regime of governance, whatever, the old empires as far as that's concerned. You have the last big pandemic, 1918, 1920, and then you have the creation of the sort of international system as we know it at the moment with the League of Nations. But in a very restricted frame because much of the world is colonized at that point of time, fine? So you have this subtext, which is a municipal movement, the second or third generation of which we're trying to engage with today, and you're having a mainstream sort of global frame, which is sitting very much in the new nation states, fine? Fast forward to 1930, 45, and the crisis had happened pretty much across the world, starting from East Asia and whatever it is as far as that's concerned. The next reference point that you bring us in this discussion is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that comes after that cataclysm of the Second World War, the creation of the UN system as it is, and the beginning of decolonization, fine. But still, the narrative very much is less about local and regional governments, but really how nation states and now a new set of entities, transnational firms, actually dominate and manage the entire global process as far as that's concerned. The Cold War, an opportunity that rises after the end of the Cold War, where we have the growth of sustainable development, many of the things we're talking about, the recognition that the planet is full, and it's not only the commons that we knew it earlier, but the global commons that have become quite critical, right? And then, a hiatus, a massive growth of globalization, neoliberal processes in some parts of the world. And then we have another reminder just now in the COVID crisis. So in some senses, I would say this is a huge opportunity for us to, in a sense, construct a new pact for the future. And thankfully, of course, this crisis that we've seen is a much smaller crisis than a global, conflict. We could have been at the point of global conflict. We might actually go into the current point of time. So what I'm saying is there is a counter current and this sort of construction that we're trying to put together of local governments and a new way. And if you look at the key things that you said, the commons, care, feminism, solidarity. These are not, some of them are relatively new ideas, but they're re-emerging one after the other. And we have to build on what we have in some senses. The difference, of course, between, let's say, 1913, 1920, let's say 41 to whatever it is today we have a number of things that are happening simultaneously. There is an opportunity for connection between the local and the global. And you have a decolonized world. Even in the national frame, you're dealing with 200 entities now, not just 10, 20, 30 empires. The second thing is it's not only about human systems. What COVID is telling us also is that we also have to embrace natural systems at the same time. If we're talking about citizenship within quotes, I think the real question for us is how do we integrate these two? Because that's the reason that, you have a virus that jumps from one system to the other, and this is not the first virus or the first sort of connection that's happening. And the key thing for us, I think that's different from the past is the nature of place, like a number of us have said, has fundamentally changed, not only because it's an urban world in some senses, but the geography and the concentration of human activity across the planet and in multiple places has fundamentally changed. So linked to that are the questions we heard. Citizenship is about the relationship to place. If the relationship to place is tied to national identities, that constructs a certain form of governance. Ownership is tied to place. So we're asking, how to sort of reorganize these principles as far as that's concerned. So we have an opportunity at the moment because there's a deep crisis of governance of the nation state. That's exactly what you're talking about. The experience of COVID is of the deep crisis of government of the nation state. And some have done well and some of them have done pretty badly. But by and large, because of the economic circumstances, you can see we're not doing very well. The second thing is also the deep challenge of governance of transnational finance, which is accelerating these processes, whether it's inequality at one end or the expansion into ecosystems in which, in a sense, we shouldn't necessarily be engaged with because human beings and human society doesn't know how to adapt to them. And finally, because we've taken over the global commons, it's coming back, like Deborah and Edgar was saying, to in a sense bite us. So we have to address these 3 or 4 critical asymmetries: the local to the global, the question of on multiple scales as far as it's concerned, the human and the natural systems, and the questions of praise. So very quickly, 3 or 4 critical things that I think are very obvious from this. First is that we need deep and rapid change. And in effect, from all of these processes, we know that in some senses, it may be 10 years or 20 years. We have a generation before the system starts unraveling at a scale in which COVID will seem like, a small incident. Now, what that means is that this has to be simultaneous changes. You can't trade off the economy for society vis-a-vis the environment. You have to deal with all of these transitions simultaneously. And we actually don't know how to do it. And that's why I think this call of the connection between science and sort of universities, citizens, and processes locally is very critical. Because this implementation, this transformation has to be local, it's contextual. It's not something that can be solved at the global scale. It doesn't work at that scale. That's exactly what I think the response of COVID is about. Even though nation states have sort of moved inward, they've closed their borders, the solutions and the ways forward, the innovation that we've heard about just now is all happening locally. But the opportunity for connection to make that happen is not so critical. But to make that sort of expand that and expand the range of spaces we're talking about, you need cross-scalar partnerships. And that's what we're talking about, the partnerships between countries, regions, and local processes and citizens inside that, with an inversion of the power relationship. We talked about, and Edgar talked about that just now, about the fact that a very large proportion of the world persists on a very small amount of space. But that's true of mandates too. The mandates also have to be inverted if we have to deal with this question. There's also the question of cross-scalar integration, which is exactly what local governments are good at, dealing with all of these multi-sectoral processes together. And then critically, the ability to act territorially. And part of the question of acting territorially is the question of ownership, of citizenship, of agency, and connection to nature in those contexts. What happens in the Arctic is totally different from what happens in Australia or what happens in the high Himalayas. It has to be contextual. So to make this happen in some senses, I've argued this separately, we need to do 3 critical things. We need to rework the mandates and invert the power of mandates in some senses. Yeah, the Westphalian Order provided a mandate for certain kinds of organization. Those mandates have to be inverted or changed. It won't happen tomorrow, but it needs to change. The second thing is we've got to build the institutional capacities so that they're not concentrated at the top end of the pyramid in just 200 nation states. And finally, we've got to reorganize how wealth and resources are created, not only for citizens, but also local governance frameworks, because if local governance frameworks don't work, it's obvious that inequality will become the most significant ordering of the economic system, because that's the nature, as Piketty has pointed out, of the way that wealth is created within the transnational financial system. So I think we have many elements to this process. It won't happen overnight, but in effect, we're asking for a fundamental set of reorganization. And I think the academics and the researchers and Ubuntu advisors would be from their own context, try and reinterpret these processes in different geographies so that we can take the innovation that comes from Latin America and transfer this to, let's say, East Asia, take what happens in Russia and bring that across to what's happening in South Africa, And that's the power of what we can do, because we have local context, but we can sort of energize and rework, in a sense, our theories of change, and hence our imaginaries and our pacts for the future, which work both locally, regionally, and globally. So that multi-level engagement, I think, is really where we have to go. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Aromar, for framing this. I think as we go on in the interventions, that the pieces are coming together, and the framing as well. I think if we use your description of the actions that we need to take to rework the frameworks and the mandates, there are important actions that we would be able to decline under each of those, which will be extremely relevant. And as you said, there might not be very new ideas. It's now the way that we place them in the ecosystem that we define the relationships. Thank you very much for that. And let us see whether we need to define an instrument for you to work together as well. That can support that notion that Edgar was putting forward of developing labs and kind of seeking a revolution of collective learning, even if it starts with us. We can make a true difference. Allow me to go now to Maria Fernanda, because I know you are in a rush, Maria Fernanda, and sorry we are a bit late. We've been talking about the evolution of the international ecosystem, the space that we are seeking as local government, multilateral system as we know it, playing a very important role in all of our discussions. What do you think we should be focusing on in relation to that multilateral system that you know so well?
Well, thank you, Emilia, and to the fellow panelists and Ubuntu advisors. I mean, it's been really inspiring, and I personally like very much the Decalogue for the post-COVID-19 from UCLG, and I think that perhaps should be considered as a point of reference, as a starting point. I think it is forward-looking, comprehensive. It addresses most of the issues that we've been discussing today, from inequalities to climate, from resilience building to renewed democracies, et cetera, et cetera. And I will just go very, very much to the point. And I see three issues. Number one, I think is a call for boosted democracies, where local and regional governments play a central role for a greater citizens' participation in agencies, and a proper balance between rights and duties. We've been talking about rights. Laia was very, very clear about that, and how all of this connects to global governance arrangements. And I think for that, we need to resignify. We've heard this need to resignify a much needed narrative of hope, of fighting indifference. And I think this is very critical at this juncture. We need mobilized, well-informed citizens to make governments at all levels and international institutions accountable in order to overcome the trust deficit that was already mentioned, a trust deficit in democracy, in politics, and in institutions, even at the international level. And just to quickly give, a very concrete examples from the World Value Survey and Latino Barometro, citizens have declared themselves indifferent to the choice of a particular government or political system. It went from 16% to 28% in 2019. And I think that, and not to speak about parliaments, about political parties, only 13% of people worldwide trust and believe in political parties. And this is, a strong call that we need to rethink and redefine democracies and how they connect to international governance. The second thing is the need to restore confidence and trust. The second thing, is the importance of the public, public goods, public services, such as health, education, social protection. I think the big lesson from COVID, among others, was the critical role of the state as a whole, meaning national and local governments, not only national state. And the role, of course, of local governments as key actors of the political landscape, as service providers, as spaces for governance, innovation, for power and democracy revisited in the configuration of the public, of public goods, public services, etc. Now, one of the key challenges now and today, as we speak, is the issue of vaccines, access to vaccines, vaccination, and the role of local governments. And the third issue is the opportunity to reconcile. And a new pact, talking about the pact for the future, a new pact among humans, among different levels of government, and to reconcile with nature, with our planet, to reconcile economic recovery with justice and environmental care, to reconcile economic recovery with the fight against transactional inequalities and a proper ecological and feminist transition. So that's how I see the pact for the future, with key principles, rights, solidarity, reciprocity, and cooperation. But in terms of strategy, and here's when the UN and the multilateral system comes to play, I think that we really need, the municipal movement has to wisely use not only the current momentum, the impetus that we see for transformation, for reinvention, for rebuilding, but in very concrete platforms and processes. This is the year for nature, no doubt. A strong voice and presence of local and regional governments in the international battlefield. It is the first time in history where we have 5 summit-level conferences on nature. The first time that we have the 3 Rio conventions having their conferences of the parties: biodiversity, desertification, climate, plus the Food Systems Summit and the Oceans Conference all together. What is the voice of the municipal movement in these particular issues and moments? And of course, ensure that the principles of the pact are properly reflected. It is also the year for women. The Generation Equality Forum and the Equality Agenda is also in the process of being shaped as we speak. And I think the voice of the municipal movement also has to be loud and clear. And the year of a profound retooling of the UN. And I think a very concrete space, very promising, by the way, is the report from the Secretary General on the future of the UN, and mandated by member states reform of the principal organs of the United Nations. And this should include, as I mentioned before, a built-in participation voice mechanism for the municipal movement and for local and regional governments as well. So back to you, Emilia, and thank you again.
Thank you very much, Maria Fernanda. What I really like about your approach is that in a way you are organizing the thoughts around what we can mean to the international multilateral system, and we can indeed be an important instrument in fighting indifference and restoring trust and redefining the importance of public action and the commons. And that acknowledgement of the role that we can play, the difference that we can make, can be a very important tool for us to come closer to the system. I am also delighted to share with you that in the final report of the UN consultations, United Cities and Local Governments is acknowledged as an important actor. And well, it's a very small sentence. And then when I was looking at it with the team, well, I was saying, how do we inform about this? How do we communicate about this? I think we need to let it sink in and take on that great responsibility that comes from the acknowledgement of being mentioned as an important policy driver, because the recognition is there. So now we need to kind of push on that and go with full force into the discussion about the reform, about what we can contribute to in this reform. So thank you for those thoughts. I also think it links very nicely with what Aromar was saying about this is not necessarily a trade-off. You are not necessarily trading social interests with economic interests, etc. I think it needs to be something that goes in parallel, and the same thinking should go when considering a renewed role for local governments in the multilateral system. It doesn't mean that the national government fully disappears from there, but it's just acknowledging a new reality. And that drives me also to the discussion around the financial architecture, Barbara, and your field of expertise. Well, we've said many things, and we've achieved some recognition, and as you were recalling also in the international discussion on financing for development. I am particularly concerned, and I sense a concern among the membership about the financing of local service delivery in the coming years. And I don't know if that should be our focus and that can help us shift the discussion, or whether we need to consider a different entry point for that. So any thoughts on this, Barbara?
Thank you very much. First of all, it has been inspirational to have everyone's perspective, and I think it's very empowering. Just a few comments, because I try to listen and digest. This anchor of human rights at the local level, I think obviously is critical, and there's a very strong mandate in decades for that. But I think the challenge is translating in the abstract citizen, human rights, digital rights, whatever, into concrete benefits. Remember the concept basic needs? Do I have access to water? Is waste processed? Transport, energy. I mean, all the things that we need to actually have, well, good quality standards of living and opportunity. And you guys have mentioned education. So in this Covenant of Mayors study, our analytical approach was always trying to bring it down to what are the benefits, and you have to think about all the political processes, to the citizens to sell it at the local level, to the local government, because very often, Amelia, as you said, people have this vision that local governments need to develop, manage, finance, and operate projects. Well, that's just not market reality. Local governments worldwide for decades have mobilized not billions, trillions of dollars through different conduits and with different partners. And, people haven't talked about the private sector, but if you look at the statistics, for example, the Climate Policy Initiative annual landscape report, where does most finance come from? Not the international climate funds, less than 1%. Not the bilaterals, but from the private sector. And the private sector actors that are corporates, utilities, project developers that put in the early equity. So, I think we have the themes, but broadly speaking, the only way, and we have to get to what you guys have said, the solutions, the models, and the roadmaps, is to really break down in a very professional management factory kind of way. What are the benefits? Who are the actors? What are the methodologies? Technology, a lot of you have talked about, we need to use digitalization. We have new climate smart technologies. We don't have a global and local innovation labs for that. We don't have a blended learning where we increase the capacity, where you combine kind of online basic technical knowledge with local educational institutes that can actually create the warriors, the soldiers, to actually get things done. The devil's in the details. And frankly, I've been at this game for too long. And the lack of response, the lack of, we always talk about the theory of change. We are failing. We have success stories. Jean-Pierre, I think you talked about this. We have success stories and we have a failure to scale, to replicate. And as local governments and regional governments, the challenge of scaling is even harder because your projects are smaller, you don't have access to technology. So this overall theme about using open source networks and communities, that has to be a core component of the dynamic feedback. And, in terms of very specific, trying to adhere to my advocacy for being specific, if you look at what we have to change in our mindsets, I think the first question is, how do you think of finance? I was the director of the Addis Ababa subnational finance report that was issued by the French government and FMDV and presented it in Addis Ababa. In it, you will see the historical success over decades. In fact, in some countries, over 100 years in Europe, of using local government funding agencies to issue domestic and international bonds, to secure commercial finance. I mean, there are ways to do things that aren't being scaled and, you can operationalize, but we fail to do that. So I think there is an urgency for UCLG to take its mandate and your understanding of the politics and your most direct relationship with citizens, and put in the technical components so you can create these factories to scale. And of course, these ways of sharing, peer sharing and whatever are critical. Now, there's another huge opportunity, and we'll have a report that I just did for the City Climate Finance Leadership Alliance that was started by the UN, which is a public-private partnership, whatever, about aggregation interventions that tries to think through what can we learn from existing aggregation effects, because you need to think aggregation to get to scale. And what are the leadership actions across the spectrum of who does what? And it's to try and create a scene setting framework to do that. And I think it would be great if you guys, want to brainstorm, and you talked about these policy councils and how do we work together. There's a lot of other things too that could be put in the mix and other people we could bring in that could help with practical. But there's another concept that I really got pushed on by different climate finance people, and that is creating an urban investment asset class. Wouldn't that be cool? If you look at the issuance of bonds, social impact, ESG, all these bonds that have been recorded post-COVID, before COVID, of course, but they've really gone up post-COVID, from both public and private sector entities, from Amazon to the African Development Bank. You guys could lobby to earmark part of that, because you are positioned to do that. Everybody understands the critical role of cities and local governments, but you've got to be able to have an advocacy campaign where people think of you, like at the UN. Local governments are largely invisible. Let's be real. It's the same thing in the financial world. So what do you do in creating an asset class, in creating the sensitivity where the $2 billion Amazon fund might look at some of your projects that are critical to public service? Doing that advocacy is really important. Also, looking at going from projects and to looking at investment vehicles like Meridian. Meridian has an Africa infrastructure fund. I think it's $500 million. And you can take a world-class institution that knows how to do this, is investment grade, that the pension funds will put money in, the insurance fund, So thinking about who to work with and what kind of instruments, also using blended finance, development partners want to give grants. They want to give concessional finance. I know I'm going over, but there are huge opportunities that you guys, but you need to have the advocacy and the technical requirements. So having the partnerships, of course, is very important. But in the analytical work, the key source of finance, of course, for climate is another key, second to the private sector, are national governments. And it's amazing when I'm in countries and I meet with governments that have climate funds and all this stuff, when they do their NDC budgets, all this, are they thinking of local governments? No, we can't just sit at the table. We've got to lobby for the allocations, whether it be the SDG, sure, you got SDG 11, but localization applies across all the SDGs, right? So there are real opportunities in terms of specific.
Sorry to push you, Barbara, but we need to wrap up.
Okay, sorry. Well, just to say, there's a lot of finance. I think you have to think about, as you said, Amelia, what is the role of the local government? It's not just to do projects. You're going to handicap yourself. You need to think, how do you facilitate the services for your citizens so that you can do all the things that are so important that you understand? And but I do think you need to bring in the highly specialized technical and finance experts so you can define by particular sector who does what, and then you can do the systems architecture of how you work together. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that, Barbara, and for introducing this idea of working with a different range of actors. And we are starting to do that. You mentioned Meridian, in fact, which is a key partner in the international fund that we have launched with UNCDF. It will take a lot of technical work. I think you are right, but probably that large advocacy that you are calling for. And it might not need to come from us alone. So at the end of the session, I'm going to propose to you that you provide us feedback on a specific advocacy action that you think we should undertake, and also advise us on only one or two specific partner that you would like us to team up with to move the agenda that you have that you all have presented. I'll give you that very brief list, only 4 points that could move us forward. That could be the next step. And allow me now to go to the secretary of a large city, one of the largest in the world, of Mexico City, to Jose Alfonso Suarez, who knows us very well because he has been very involved in our work around culture. And Jose Alfonso, we would like to start coming to the end of this session with a local view as well. What is there next for you as Mexico City? And what kind of role do you think that UCLG should play in those ambitions for your city? Muchas gracias por estar con nosotros.
Al contrario, muchas gracias, Emilia. Un saludo muy cordial del Gobierno de la Ciudad de México, de su jefa de gobierno, la doctora Claudia Sheinbaum, y el hecho de invitarnos a participar en un tema que para nosotros es apasionante. ¿Qué sigue? ¿Cuál es la siguiente etapa en una pandemia que nos ha involucrado a todos? Definitivamente para la Ciudad de México es importantísimo el establecimiento de un pacto entre ciudades, toda vez que de manera institucional y de manera informal hemos establecido contactos con muy diversas ciudades a efecto de poder construir de la mejor manera las acciones que en función a el COVID hemos tenido que implementar en esta ciudad capital de cerca de 8 millones de habitantes y de 20 millones de cohabitantes en toda la territorialidad. En primer término, diré que uno de los grandes aportes de COVID ha sido ubicarnos en la justa dimensión de seres humanos mandatados para generar el bienestar de quienes han decidido que seamos parte del gobierno. Y en este concepto hemos acudido al gobierno nacional a efecto de poder establecer por vez primera un sistema de atención médica sin distingo de procedencia, de calidad, derechohabiencia, lo cual nos ha permitido incrementar en los últimos meses más del 40% de la capacidad hospitalaria para brindar la atención preventiva y la atención que requiere la situación de COVID. Segundo término, hemos entendido que todas y todos somos corresponsables de la solución, que los gobiernos solos no pueden, sin la participación de iniciativa privada, de la academia, de los propios ciudadanos, sería difícil entender. Y en este concepto que compartimos con algunas ciudades, particularmente con Barcelona, en relación a la innovación y una ciudad de derechos, hemos aprendido a que los derechos no se tutelan, los derechos se ejercen y se comparten corresponsablemente para poder llegar a el fin que se busca. Es decir, hemos generado un concepto de democracia participativa, corresponsable y solidaria que se ejerce el día a día. En tercer término, es lo que mencionaba alguna de las ponentes que me antecedió, la recuperación de lo público. Y en este sentido, generar el balance entre las necesidades de prevención con una crisis económica derivada de la práctica suspensión de actividades, nos ha llevado a resignificar la economía para reactivarla sin riesgos, con la participación de los actores económicos y empezar de esa forma a evitar el colapso económico al tiempo de generar condiciones de impuestos que permitan seguir sufragando las acciones sanitarias que requiere la pandemia en este momento particular. Esto nos está permitiendo restaurar la confianza entre los diferentes sectores y el gobierno de ciudad y el gobierno de alcaldías, porque hemos decidido dejar un poco de lado las diferencias y los matices político-partidarios para centrarnos fundamentalmente en este proceso de recuperación de la ciudad, una ciudad sin riesgos sanitarios, una ciudad sin riesgos sociales, una ciudad sin riesgos económicos. En síntesis, nosotros vemos con muy buenos ojos el establecimiento de ese pacto para el futuro con los gobiernos de las diferentes ciudades y una vez más manifestamos nuestro interés por participar activamente en la construcción de este pacto. Gracias, muy amables por habernos permitido transmitirles la experiencia de la Ciudad de México y el Valle de México, porque también eso lo hemos logrado. Trabajamos dos entidades, es decir, el Estado de México y la Ciudad de México. En la zona metropolitana tenemos por vez primera todos los procesos concertados entre los actores políticos, económicos y sociales de esta zona metropolitana. Gracias.
Pues muchísimas gracias, secretario. Yo creo que ha traído, bueno, no solamente las visiones y los sueños de la ciudad, pero también un tema muy importante para nuestra agenda, que es el tema metropolitano, también que creo que tiene que jugar un papel importante dentro de ese pacto hacia el futuro. Es un pacto efectivamente de ciudades por las ciudades, pero con la ciudadanía, ¿no? Y con una ambición global, ¿no? Para la transformación global. So colleagues, I would like to open, we are over time, so some of you had to leave already. If you don't have time, please feel free to leave. But I would like to open the floor a little bit to see whether you have quick remarks, because it's such a rich exchange that we have had, very inspirational, absolutely. So I would like to open the floor. Of course, Ubuntu advisors, give me a sign if you want to intervene. But I see my colleague, the Secretary General for the European section, Frédéric Vallier. You have raised your hand, Frédéric, if I understand well. So please go ahead, and thank you for staying with us for the whole session.
Merci, merci Emilia. Je sais pas, je vais parler en français parce que comme ça va donner un peu l'occasion aux interprètes de traduire en français aussi. D'abord, merci beaucoup pour cette réunion qui était très riche en exposés. Moi, j'ai une question qui n'est pas une question, mais peut-être une réflexion que nous devrions porter ensemble. Je partage ce qu'a dit Laïa Bonnette tout à l'heure sur l'importance des droits humains, sur la nécessité de réfléchir peut-être aussi au socle des valeurs qui sont les nôtres. Quelles valeurs le mouvement municipal porte quand on parle des droits de l'homme, de l'égalité? On a beaucoup parlé d'égalité femmes-hommes, du droit des migrants, et comment on peut définir ce socle de valeurs ensemble pour pouvoir agir auprès des États, auprès des institutions internationales. Mais c'est un débat compliqué parce que je sais que dans notre réseau, qui est très grand et qui englobe l'ensemble des mouvements locaux et régionaux, on peut avoir des visions parfois un peu différentes. Donc, c'est un débat qui peut être difficile à mener. Mais je crois que ce serait intéressant de montrer justement aux États que les villes et les régions et les associations de collectivités territoriales ont la possibilité de développer un discours qui est différent de celui des États, plus intégrateur, plus solidaire, et plus engagé sur la question des droits humains, du respect de la diversité, du respect des minorités. Je pense par exemple aux communautés LGBT qui sont l'objet souvent de discrimination dans certains pays, ou évidemment du droit des femmes. On a vu aussi les débats dans différents pays sur le droit à l'avortement, par exemple. Au-delà de l'égalité politique que nous portons, il y a aussi des sujets qui méritent notre attention et qui, je pense, mériteraient qu'on approfondisse justement en quoi les gouvernements locaux et régionaux peuvent avoir une action pour développer des droits nouveaux. Et je n'ai pas parlé de l'environnement, mais je partage aussi ce qui a été dit sur ces questions.
Thank you very much, Frederic. And I take this opportunity to say that the Committee on Social Inclusion and Human Rights, but also in their links with the Policy Council on Right to the City, have suggested to work out on how these new this evolved human rights movement can be defined, and that we will be seeing the representatives of the UN Commission on Human Rights. In fact, we've got a meeting tomorrow where we're going to be sharing with them this renewed vision. What is the difference between local governments and other spheres of government in this approach? But you are absolutely right. Our membership is very diverse. As you know, what we are trying to do, and I think to a large extent is working well, is to go with those that want to go further and to make sure that everybody feels included in the process, to allow the champions to break some of the glass ceilings that are there in the policy topics, but also make sure that other continue to be engaged. So hopefully with this broader concept of human rights, we can do that as well. And I also wanted to remind everybody that we have the World Council of United Cities and Local Government has adopted this universal declaration for the rights for humanity that is being promoted in France. It also calls for what Aramar was saying is no longer a human rights or humanity as men driven only, but it's a different relationship with nature where nature also has those rights, and that needs to be part of this dialogue. And hopefully our work with Ubuntu and the policy councils can help us materialize and make this more, give this a practical shape. So thank you very much, Frederic, but we'll need to pay a lot of attention to how we do that with the diverse membership that we have. I couldn't agree more. Any other colleagues that would like to intervene? Octavi, from our section, Metropolis, the World Organization for
Thank you, Emilia, and thank you to all the Ubuntu representatives. Just very briefly, whilst I was hearing you all the afternoon here in Barcelona, maybe I'm going to say an obvious remark, but you have highlighted that more than ever, we're living in a complex world. You have highlighted all the complexities and interconnections, while sometimes at the global level, at the national levels, we live in a world of black and white, yes or not, of polarization. So I think these spaces that you are creating in UCLG, connecting with other actors, we can have this discussion of connecting the complexities, connecting all the different aspects, rights, realities, and all, and that we have to find the right place to pass all the message through. And as well, what I see is that it's at the local level that we see that the solutions to these complexities and the connections, the right connections, are easier to find. I don't mean that it's easy, but it's easier to find that sometimes at the global level. And that's where these discussions with citizens and communities, because they are facing all these complexities on their everyday lives. So I think that's the way to go. I mean, we don't need to be scared about the complexity. We have to say that, to accept that we live in a complex world, and there's plenty of colors within this complex world. It's not only black and white.
Yeah, I don't find it such an obvious remark, Octavi. So thank you very much for that. I think accepting complexity, it will be very critical for the exercise that we are about to bring forward, and that we started a while ago. So thank you for this, and let us see how we can shape the instruments to allow for that safety and complexity. To allow ourselves to try out things, even make mistakes. And I see Farida was raising her hand. Am I right, Farida?
Yes. So I just, on because we keep going back to the human rights framework, I'm someone who works within that framework. I'm very conscious that that cannot be the final yardstick against which we are measuring anything, because human rights concepts need to develop. And so they change through social movements. So not to forget the importance when you're moving forward, that to be able to move this forward, it's really people's movements, social movements, bringing us together. And just underlining again, I think it was critical, this idea of belonging, citizenship, which is such a complex issue these days. So yeah, we need to work on that. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, and you are absolutely right that we need to engage with civil society. We've got this what we call a town hall process that we have started, and the discussions with civil society are the exercise that we refer to as the cities are listening exercise. I think we wouldn't be in UCLG with a space for discussion around the right to the city if it were not because of the platform on right for the city. So we take note of this, and why we still find the need to get the international community to acknowledge that we are a sphere of government, and this is very important part of our advocacy. I don't think that our membership can and ever forgets that, well, what they do is represent the citizens, and they need the communities there to actually shape the kind of future. So Farida, we will take this into account, and I think your knowledge on the whole right based system is extremely important. Thank you for those inputs. I've got my colleague, the Secretary General of UCLG MEWA, Middle East and West Asia, that would like to take the floor. Mehmet, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Emilia. It was a very fruitful meeting, and also thank you for the Ubuntu advisors. I think that within the mentioned 3 axes, we should explore the transnational movement of people, which causes the reshape the understanding of citizenship concept and making this term more diverse. Local governments already embrace their fellow citizens, regardless of their national origin. And we believe that national governments will have to much more flexible in the future in terms of their definition of citizenship. As we will be talking more of a global citizenship in the future. We also consider local and general national differences while creating and implementing policies. And in this transition period, where we become more and more digitalized, we should take into consideration the ideas of digital natives and digital immigrants. The mentioned 3 axes of the UCLG's pact will greatly contribute to the work of the thematic committees of UCLG MEWA, which will be in the interest of our members. Thank you, Emilia.
Thank you very much. And this brings me also to how, and this is thinking that we will need to develop together as colleagues, secretaries general. I think we need to think about this pact that is embraced now by the organization and the partners as a global exercise, but it will need to have also regional and sectoral exercises around it. So like many of the policy that we develop in UCLG. So your points are extremely important, Mehmet, and thank you for this, for embracing also the discussion around the global citizenship with one of the countries that receives more refugees around the world, Turkey, and with most of the movement around refugees in your region. This is certainly a very relevant debate, a very strong sign also, very strong statement. So thank you very much for that. I don't see other hands now. Anybody else that would like to make a comment? Jean-Pierre, any last comments? Any of the Ubuntu advisors? Look, if I know that some of you are leaving already. From 80, we are down to 53 participants, but I don't get to put you together that often. So feel free to take the floor. I see Anna and then Jean-Pierre. I'm not sure. Anna? Unmute yourself. Microfono, Anna.
Yes. Sorry. I was mute. Sorry, I want to say again, thank you very much. It was a very inspiring meeting and all the contribution, very, very relevant. I want to make a very final short statement. A feminist politics, a green economy, redistribution and recognition of diversity. The local level is the place where it happens. We know we need knowledge production, statistic production. We need to highlight our committed leaders within UCLG and also the society, bringing cross-regional and local experience, as Aruna said. We need to give rights to all, and to give rights to all needs to produce proposals of politics, knowing what is doing each government all around the world, to recenter people at the community level, to listen the voices of the people, the youth, the women, the handicapped, the Afro-descendant, the indigenous, etc., the migrants. We need to listen those voices, as Saskia Sassen says, yeah, and the multilateral level, to sit at the table, but to be very aware who sits at the table, what is the diversity of the voices at that table. What we want to assure at the table. This is as a final statement I wanted to share with you all. Thank you very much again. Very, very excellent meeting.
Thank you, Anna. And we are counting on you to take us to the next step on this definition of what does a feminist municipal movement entail. What is that generation equality? And we hope we can work with you and your network to further define this. Inspired on the leadership that we have among us of Laia and others. Jean-Pierre, did I charm you to give a very short feedback?
I think what happened here, I was really, really enlightened by many of the contributions that I listened to. And my takeaway is the complexity.
Very good.
Another one is that for sure, the best level to address this complexity is the local one, the territorial one. Another one that I'm taking is also that culture is key, because it's key for defining belonging, it's key for reconnecting to people, it's key to defend rights, is key for respect to differences, diversity, nature. So it is very important that we really put emphasis on how to rebuild based on culture, because it then allows us to respect this complexity, diversity, nature, oneness in humanity. And we are looking for a new humanity. And this new humanity is around not only human beings, but also nature, not only being in connection with one another, but also understanding that we are one in a reduced planet, and that we owe to the next generation to keep this planet safe. Yeah.
Well, Jean-Pierre, I think you have left us with all those key messages in one. So thank you very much for that. I am very grateful for our interpreters, which are diehards and always stay with us, no matter how long we are ready to go. Thank you very much. And just very quickly, the next steps that I propose to you, which you will also receive on writing to our Ubuntu advisors, those that left already. I would like to propose that you send us one thought of a session that we should organize to deepen a specific topic that you consider critical for this agenda. If there is anything that you say, well, next time we meet, we should be meeting around this topic. So that's homework number one. Then second part of the homework is to propose a partner that you think we might be missing, that you would like to see at our table, this new table that we are setting, this new global table. Who should be there? And then if you are just mentioning that, you are also committing to help us to get that partner sitting with us. Yes, don't just say the name. You need to help us get that partner and sit there. And then finally, propose a specific advocacy action that you would like us to do, that you think we are missing or that we haven't done before. Nothing is too complex and nothing is out of your mandate. Just be wild, propose whatever, and then we will see whether we can do it or not. And I just finally wanted to say that if you have specific proposals that you would like to make beyond these issues, in terms of defining mechanisms to work together or defining experimentations like the ones the labs that Edgar was proposing, put it through to us. We will see whether we can mobilize funding to make that happen, whether we can find partnerships that can facilitate that. Nothing is too small or too big for us to at least consider. Please share your ideas, because that's what we are hoping to hear from you. Just wanted to let you know that our retreat is coming up around the week of the 15th of February. And the week before that, we have the political policy council sessions. I will be calling upon some of you to make an inspiring pitch there for those policy councils that I listed before. Look, you can also say no. I know you are busy, that you are doing this because you believe in the cause. So I don't want to put too much pressure, but I do really hope that you can be with us throughout the year, because the agenda is too big for anyone to handle it alone. And now I leave you with some music. Listen again to this wonderful song of Ubuntu and the work that this Dutch singer born in Curaçao or Aruba, I think, is doing with children around the world.
We are one world citizens.
Thank
so that
you,
means
everybody.
If someone ain't living right, we all ain't living right. I am because we are. Ubuntu, 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 Ubuntu. I won't go far without you. Ubuntu, 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 Ubuntu. It's not about me, but the crew. Ubuntu, 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 Ubuntu. Stick together like glue. Ubuntu, 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 Ubuntu. Global goals, what it do? G-L-O-B-A-L, gold. G-L-O-B-A-l, gold. G-L-O-B-A-l, gold. For each and every soul. Without you, life don't make sense. We working so misery ends. Can't be happy till we all free. Humanity, one family. So much money. Why do we have poverty?
Thank you, everybody. Please be safe, be creative. See you soon again. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Happy New Year, She.
Thank you.
Chao, Jorge. Hablamos muy pronto.
Sí, sí, tenemos mucho que hablar. Abrazos y gracias.
Chao. Thank you, Mehmet. Bye.
So